Before we get started with the making of the bag, I wanted to go over your fabric choices real quick. Now, you can make your bag out of anything that you want to, but there is a fabric out there called canvas or duck cloth, which is a stronger, heavier duty fabric that would be better to make your tote bags with than like quilting fabric. The thinner quilting fabric tends to be a very thin fabric and it wears very easily. So if you use something like this, you need to make sure that you interface it, or you need to put something behind it to give it strength, because this, you see how flimsy this looks compared to something like this? See how stiff that looks? There's a difference between these fabrics. This is kind of thin and flimsy, and this is kind of stiff. It's a little stronger, it's a little thicker. So this is what I would recommend using in your tote bag. Now, you can do accents or trims or something, pockets. You could do pockets with this type of fabric on the inside of your bag, but you don't want your body to be made out of this. It's just not strong enough. So what I have here is called duck canvas, or just canvas, and it comes in a lot of colors. So this is what I have. I'm not making anything out of this right now, probably another zipper bag later. But then I've got black, and then I also have a natural, and this is what it feels like when it comes off the bolt. It's unwashed, it's very stiff. There's a very stiffness to it. There is a stiffness to it. And this one, this is a little softer. It's still just as strong, but it's a little softer. And this, I washed this already. I serged my edge and washed the fabric, so I know that it's been washed already. So, but what I'm using is this. This is the fabric that I'm using for my bag for the video. It's an upholstery fabric. You can find this in the upholstery section or the home deck section of your local fabric store. And this is something that I actually purchased online. I think I purchased this online, I'm not sure. I was gonna do something fantabulous with it, and then it never happened, so I have a lot of it left. Anyways, so this is what I'm using, and on the inside of my bag, I have my seams folded. I don't know, you won't be able to see that very well because of the light, but I've done French seam on here, but we're not going to do that. I'm going to show you a simple way to do it by just zigzagging the edges. That way, whatever fabric that you choose to have, whatever fabric that you want, if it frays, the zigzag stitch will keep it from fraying, and you can use it unless you have a serger. And we'll go into other techniques like this in later videos. But so let's get started on our bag. Okay, for our bag, I've already cut out our pattern. You have two patterns for our strap and for our bag body. And for our straps, you need to cut out two rectangles, 24 inches by 3.5 inches. So you'll need two of them, and I've already have my two cut out here. So that's 24 by 3.5. And then my body is one long rectangle, and it is 37.5 inches by 19 inches. So one long rectangle, 19, 37.5, 19, 37.5, one large rectangle, and you only cut out one of those, which I already have right here. But the first things that we're gonna do is we're gonna do our straps. Okay, so here for our handles, I had my pattern 24 inches by 3.5 inches. That includes your seam allowance, so you don't even have to worry about adding seam allowance because it's all included in the measurements. You cut out two pieces of fabric, and what you're going to do is you're going to fold right sides together. So the good side and the bad side, the right side, gets folded together, and then you're going to pin it. Because what you're going to do, you're going to sew your seam, and then you're going to flip the tube that you create inside out so that the seam will be in on the inside. So I'm going to do this real quick, and then I'm going to go sew both of the straps at the same time. So I'm going to sew a seam line here, and I'm going to sew a seam line here. And let me get that. So now that I have both those pinned, I'm going to go sew along the seam. I'm going to use dark thread so you guys can see where I'm stitching. And also, just a reminder, normally when you are making something, if you are making something that you're going to wear, an item of apparel or a piece of clothing, shirt, shorts, dresses, skirts, you want to wash your fabric and dry it the same way that you're going to wash and dry it when you wear it. But because we are making just a regular tote bag, you don't have to worry about washing anything. You can use it straight off the bolt. It's okay. So I'm going to go get these sewn together and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got both my straps sewn up and I used a 1/4 inch seam allowance for all my seams. And I'll use a 1/4 inch seam allowance for the straps, but my seam allowances will be slightly different for the main body of the bag. But what I did is I flipped it inside out. So I took it, stuffed my hand in there. I flattened this part out because it just makes it a little easier. Now this tube is big enough that I can stuff my thumb in there. So I'm going to use my thumb to push everything in. And I'm going to push it in and push the fabric over my thumb. Like this. And I'm going to continue pushing fabric in and just working it until it pops out the other end. Now, something I do want to let you know, this is the same way that you make spaghetti straps. This is the same way you make other tubes that you might need to turn, but there'll be different ways to turn those. For example, this one is I can just use my thumb because it's big enough that I can use my thumb. Other smaller, thinner tubes, you'll need like a chopstick or a pencil. I wouldn't recommend scissors because if you try to use scissors, the pointy tips of scissors, to turn your tube, you have a really good chance of poking a hole in your fabric, and then you'll have to do it all over again. So here you go. I can feel the fabric scrunching up right here, and it's inching its way out. Let's see. I can't feel it yet, so I'm going to keep pushing. Just keep on pushing. Until I can, oh, there it is right there. So I'm going to pull this out. Flip that. Alright, now I've got 2 tubes. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to flatten them out so the seam that I have is on, this is going to be the inside of my handle. So I'm going to finger press it, flatten everything out, finger press it so my seam is in the middle of one side. Just like this. I'm going to go to my ironing board and I'm going to press all this flat. And once I've got this ironed, I will come back. For this next step, on the bag that I have, the strap was too wide and it would just scrunch in my hand, so I decided that I would take it and fold it in half here just where my hand would sit, so it would be more comfortable in my hand. And so that's what I'm going to do here on these straps. Now this is an optional step. You don't have to do this if you don't want to do this. But if you do want to do it, this is how it's done. So I went ahead and I took my strap and I folded it in half. I folded it in half and I marked the exact middle with a pin right here. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take that and use that as a mark because I'm going to make a 6-inch mark. So that middle pin is going to go at 3 inches and I'm going to make a mark. Well, let me grab a pen. There we go. I'm going to use my invisible ink pen and I am going to mark 3 inches on this side and 3 inches on that side. So 3 inches here. Flip that around and do 3 inches on the other side. So that's a 6-inch width right there, and that's just big enough for my hand and a little extra. So once I have that, I'm going to fold the strap in half with the seam on the inside like this, and I'm going to mark right there at those marks. Or pin, sorry, not mark, I'm going to pin at those marks. I'm going to pin over here on this one. And I'm going to pin in the middle too. So then I'm going to sew a seam. I'm going to sew a seam right here, maybe about 1/8 of an inch, or as close to the edge as I can get without falling off of it, and just go down from this mark or this pin to this pin. I'm going to do it here and I'm going to do it there. And once I have it sewn, I'm going to go back and iron. I'm going to press the seam and I'm going to press it flat right here, just in these marks. And the rest of this will just stay flat. So I'm going to do that for this one too. Okay, now that my straps are done, or as done as they're going to get, so I have my handle, my tube created, sewn, ironed, and then I created a little extra space for a little bit of narrowness, so when I tote my bag it's not so scrunchy in my hand. But now that we're done with that step, we're going to set these aside and go to our bag. So, just a reminder, you need a rectangle of 37.5 inches by 19 inches, and you only need one piece. So you just need to cut out one piece of fabric. Now, seam allowances are all included in this as well, and I am going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance for my sides. My top is going to be done slightly different, but for right now my sides are going to be a 1/4 inch as well. So I'm going to fold my fabric in half. I'm going to pin all this together. Line up everything. Well, let me turn so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so what I did, I folded my fabric in half and I pinned it. I only used 3 pins because I don't need a lot of pins. I just need it to stay in place. And if you notice, this is the bottom of the bag where the fold is, and this is going to be the top. But as I sew it, I'm going to put it in like this. I'm going to start here on this side, and I have my pins perpendicular to my seam. It's easier to pull them out like this instead of like this. So I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch down here and a 1/4 inch down here, and then I'm going to go back in between my seam and the edge of my fabric. I'm going to do a zigzag stitch, and that's going to help keep the fabric from fraying as I use it. So I'm going to go get that and I'll be right back. Okay, so I sewed my edges. I did a zigzag on them so that with use of the bag, the edges will probably start fraying, like right here. You see it's starting to fray right there already, but the zigzag will keep it from fraying and opening a hole and creating a hole. So that's a good thing to do. If you have a serger, you can serge the edges, but for right now this is good enough as it is. So what we want to do next is we want to make the bottom of the bag, and we're not going to create a bottom out of thin air. We're going to, first of all, we're going to finger press this down because this is going to help us line up things. And then you want to open it up. If I can grab that other side. Like this. Open it up, and you want to lay that crease that you just finger pressed, you want to lay it against the seam on the inside. Now it's going to take some finagling, And you have to feel around. I can see the crease and I can feel the seam on the inside. So I'm going to line it up like that. And then I'm going to pin it in place. And you only want to do like maybe 4 inches in right here. Like here. Like that, because you'll want to measure. I don't remember how long this one was. So this, we're going to do the same as this one, and this one was about 4.5 inches. So what we want to do is measure down, so the triangle that we have here marks at 4.5 inches. So there's an inch there, 4.5, scoot up to right there. So this is where we want to be. You know what? I'm going to get a Sharpie marker. I don't know why I don't have one over there. Just makes life so much simpler. So instead of pinning that, so we already have it pinned down. We just need a mark where we need to sew and cut. So from my inch to 4.5, I'm just going to draw a line real quick. Doesn't have to be perfect or fancy, as long as we know where to sew. Okay. I'm going to do one on each side. Now I'm going to do the other side. I'm going to sew it and zigzag it. Okay, so there's the bottom of the bag. So there are my marks, and I sewed my line, my stitching right on that blue line, and then I zigzagged right beside it. So now I'm going to cut them off. So right beside that zigzag stitch, not through the zigzag, but right beside it, I'm just going to trim that part off. Just like that. See? So there's my stitching line, there's my zigzag, and I trimmed right beside it. And make sure you don't catch anything behind when you're trimming. Okay, so that's the bottom of the bag. Now, so you can see it can stand up on its own. Check that out. See? Now, we're going to add our straps. Okay, so this is what I've done. Now that we got our inside and our bottom of our bag done, I flipped it inside out and I ironed the top. So what I did is, I did it just like this. I ironed it, I had it like this. I folded it over a 1/2 inch, ironed all the way around, and then I went back and folded it over again and ironed it all the way around again. So that was a 1/2 inch my first time. The second time was about 1 inch to 1 1/4 inches. And I did it all the way around. So once I got everything ironed, and it's all nice and flat, mostly, I went back and I lined up my seams to find the middle of the bag. So then I pressed it all down. Like I said, perfection is okay if we can manage it, but if you don't, if it's not perfect, that's okay too. It doesn't have to be perfect. So then I pressed this out just like this, so my seams both lined up, and I got the middle part of each side of my bag where my pins are. So now what I'm going to do is flap it this way. I'm going to match up my pins, and my seams are all flat, and this is where my straps come in. We want to mark 6 inches from here. So 3 inches on this side and 3 inches on this side. We're going to do that on the inside though, because we don't necessarily want it to be seen. So 3 inches. And if you're okay with marks showing, I mean, this is just a bag I'm going to use to tote groceries around in, so I'm okay having marks shown. but I'm just going to do a little mark right there. A little mark right there. And then I'm going to do 3 inches on the other side. And mark right there. Oh, I guess I should do the other side while I'm here, huh? All right, so 3 inches from my pin. 3 inches this way. Okay, so now both my marks kind of match up right there. Not looking for perfection. It's okay if it's uneven. But this is where our straps come in. So we want this part where the seam is going to be on the inside. So if we want it like this, that means this needs to be like this. So we're gonna slide our strap just like, well, you know what? I'm gonna trim that off because that's just a mess. Slide our strap like this. And I'm going to fold my strap up like this. And I'm going to pin it in place through all the fabric. So I'm going to, here, let me pin it so you can see it. Okay, so I slid it in and folded it over so that it looks like this on the other side. I'm going to do the exact same thing, just follow this around here, slide it in. So the marks that we made, remember we need 6 inches between our straps. So the strap's going to slide in on the outside of that dot. Slide that in there, just like that. Oh, you know what, I'm going to trim the edge. Because those little fraying bits, they'll get all over the place. So we're just going to slide that in there like that. I'm going to butt, the end of this is going to be butted here to the top. I can feel it when it stops. I'm going to fold it over like this. And then I'm going to pin it. Okay, so I'm going to take that one out. There's no need for that one. I'm going to flip it and do the other side. Alright, now that I have both of those pinned up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew a line here at the bottom, going all the way around. I'm going to go back and do a line at the top, all the way around. When I'm done, I'll come back. Okay, there you go. So here, I'll show you the inside. So this is what I did. I had everything pinned, and I started on the side seam, because you don't want to start in the middle. If you start in the middle, sometimes when you start and end your seam lines, there's a little nesting, a little extra thread there, and it's not very pretty. So I always start and end on the side seam, because nobody's going to notice that. But then I went all the way around the bottom, and I went all the way around the top, and I made sure to catch my handles, because that gives it extra strength to be able to stay in that seam and that seam. So it's a nice and sturdy bag now. And so there you go. You flip everything out, and ta-da! You're all done. Now you can tote it around at school, or you can put your groceries in there. I'm going to use mine as a grocery bag, and there you go. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and there you go.